Hi friends, I'm Chelsea Grayson coming to you once again from the Office of the CEO. This is my show where I can help you be more successful in your current career, and I can also help you successfully transition to a new career. Today I wanted to continue the topic that we've been on for the last couple of episodes in respect of successfully transitioning to a new career. And specifically, I wanted to talk about two subtopics. So one of them is the idea that even if you're not consciously planning a career transition, somebody might be watching you and watching your performance and silently determining for themselves whether a career transition might be good for you. So kind of like an extended job interview that you don't even know you're on, which can end up in a really great place for you. So I wanted to talk about that first. And then second, I wanted to briefly touch on the idea that sometimes a career transition doesn't have to be switching completely over to a new industry or a new segment. It doesn't have to be such an incredibly stark cutoff from what you're currently doing to what you want to do. Sometimes it can be more of a subtle shift that's still considered to be a career change, but it's less dramatic. So let's talk about the first subtopic, and this is even if you're not planning a career change, somebody might be planning one for you. And I wanted to illustrate this by use of personal anecdote. So as all of you guys know, I was for almost 20 years, I was a lawyer. I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I was a partner at the law firm of Jones Day. And I was ultimately recruited to come in and be the general counsel at American Apparel, which at the time was publicly traded, though we have several large bondholders, including the hedge fund Goldman Sachs. And over the course of the first year of my being general counsel, there was a lot going on, as you guys can read about from press clippings from back then, 2014 to 2015. We had over $500 million in litigation. We had a proxy contest. We had an SEC investigation into embezzlement. There were all sorts of issues that we had to deal with, and it was sort of all hands on deck. And there were so many issues that I was dealing with as the general counsel that it became necessary for me to understand what was happening across business divisions in the company. So not just to understand what I was doing in the legal department, but to understand if I pulled a lever in the legal department, if I negotiated a particular agreement in a certain way, if I allowed a particular piece of litigation to settle in a particular way, if I had conversations with third parties where we made certain agreements, how is that going to impact the business divisions of the company, which are by far and away the most important, right? Those are the revenue generating business divisions versus the legal department, which is generally a cost center, I'm sorry to say. So I really wanted to be careful about what I was doing and how it affected the rest of the company. So as you guys have heard me talk about, I made a very conscious decision to get to know the heads of the other business divisions and to really understand what was going on there so I could contextualize my own decisions. And I started inviting myself in a very polite and respectful way to other business divisions meetings. I started popping in to people's offices just to sort of glean what they'd been up to all day and to maybe touch base with them about something I was working on and see how it might impact them. And in so doing, I came to really get a broad understanding of the business, and the board, hearing me make enough presentations to them, also came to understand that I had a very broad understanding of the business in general. And they saw that some other folks needed to have some of the burden taken off of their shoulders because, again, I was all hands on deck at the company at that point, and we had a very streamlined corporate staff. And that's when they decided to move 3 business divisions. So risk management, environmental health and safety, and human resources, to move those 3 business divisions under me so that I was then both the general counsel and also the chief administrative officer. So that was sort of thing one. And then at the end of that year, it became very obvious that we were in a liquidity crisis and we were not going to be able to meet our bond payments, in particular to Goldman Sachs, as I mentioned earlier. So the board had enough confidence in me, both because of my background previously as a deal lawyer, a transaction lawyer who negotiated deals for a living, but also because they came to understand my general overall business understanding of the company. They sent me out to negotiate with Goldman Sachs to see what we could do in terms of maybe getting a reprieve on the payment that was going to be coming due to them. And in due course, we ended up negotiating a settlement, which was, technically speaking, a debt for equity swap, whereby Goldman Sachs agreed to take us private and we could restructure our debt, both with them as well as with our other creditors. So now we've been taken private, and now our main owner is Goldman Sachs. And towards the beginning of the next year, Goldman Sachs approached me and said, hey, listen, we've been watching you for a year, both from afar as just a bondholder and watching what you've been doing in terms of running those various business divisions. And we've been speaking with the board about what you've been doing. And then we got to see firsthand what you were like because you came and negotiated the debt for equity swap with us when we took you private. And we think you'd actually make a great fit to be the next CEO of American Apparel. Well, although I'd always had aspirations, to be honest, of jumping over to the business side and leaving the legal side completely, I didn't imagine it was going to happen that soon in my career, being in company. That was the first company I'd been with other than my law firms. And I certainly didn't imagine that they had been looking at me or considering me in that way. And come to find out, it wasn't just that they had been looking at me, they'd actually considered other options and interviewed a couple of other people. I wasn't aware of that and had ultimately come to the conclusion that I was actually the right fit. So the job was mine for the taking if I wanted it. Again, I had no idea this was happening behind the scenes. And of course, I quickly accepted because you don't turn down an offer like that. But again, this was a job interview that I'd apparently been on for almost a year and a half. Had no idea that I was on it, and I got the job without asking. So that career transition was made for me, although of course I very much wanted it. And that's a really interesting example of people always watching from afar. So you should always perform as if you are in a long extended job interview, basically. And to be honest, before I finish this anecdote, I'll give you the rest. It actually happened again because after I became the CEO of American Apparel, and we ultimately, 3 years down the line, we ultimately sold it to Gildan, as you guys have heard me talk about. I then declared my intention that for the rest of my career, I wanted to sit on boards of directors and mostly public company boards of directors. Goldman Sachs then came to me and said, guess what? We also own part of True Religion. Would you like to come sit on that board and see if you really like sitting on boards of directors? So that gave me a great start to my career as a board member. And as you guys know, the rest is history, because about a year later, after hearing me talk in the boardroom and after seeing how I engaged with management in my off time out of the boardroom, Goldman Sachs once again came to me and said, hey, listen, we're thinking about making a change in the CEO office. Would you consider being the CEO of True Religion? And that's how that happened. So again, and I hate to look so naive twice in a row, but that one actually also took me out of left field. I had actually suggested to them a couple of options if they were looking to switch CEOs. I had recommended to them a couple of my colleagues and friends that I thought would be perfect, that I would have loved working with as a board member to their CEO. And Goldman Sachs just said, no, it's been you that we've been considering. So again, you just never know who's watching. You never know who's going to make the transition for you, even if you aren't consciously aware that you want that transition. So just sort of always be on your P's and Q's and not just doing your best just because you want the promotion or just because you want a great performance evaluation or you want a raise. Always be performing your best and showing all facets of your skill set and all of your developed and developing expertise in case somebody's watching that might think that there's something else in store for you. So let's move on to the next topic, which will be very short, but it's this idea that sometimes a career change doesn't have to be all so dramatic as, well, I was a journalist with a newspaper, and now I'm going to switch and be a marine biologist because I've always wanted to swim with whales. By the way, I have always wanted to swim with whales, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic, right? I mean, it could be that you are working at the store level with a retailer. So let's say you're a salesperson with American Apparel and you're working in one of the stores. And you slowly begin to realize that you really love the industry. You love retail apparel, or maybe it's that you love that particular sort of ultra premium, fashion blank style of apparel, or you love the things that American Apparel stands for, and you want to continue to work with companies that have certain morals and principles that they use that they speak through their apparel with too. But you don't necessarily want to make an industry change, but you want to change the sort of function that you hold within that particular industry. So what you could do in that situation is try to reach corporate, and I wouldn't suggest jumping over your boss, who's the store manager, right? Ask your store manager if she will connect you with the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer of the company. Go have a conversation with the CHRO. Ask what other positions might be available in the company that are not at the retail brick and mortar level, but that might be at the corporate level, and see what she has to offer. Maybe she's got something in HR, maybe she's got something in the e-com department, maybe she's got something basic, an entry-level position in the accounting group, maybe she's got something under the office of the COO where a lot of the strategic initiatives get developed and implemented. Maybe even she's got an executive assistant position open, but it's for somebody high level like the CEO, the CFO, or the COO. And that might be a really interesting way for you to gain access into the corporate group and go from there. So again, if you're thinking that you want a career change, and I think in the next episode, I'll talk a little bit about how you can really do a good gut check and figure out whether a career change is right for you. But if you're thinking about doing it and the idea of making a huge transition is really intimidating, think about a less dramatic way to change what you're currently doing while staying in the same industry, so you know all the terms of art and you're relatively familiar with the sort of flow of that business, and see if that helps, and see if that helps you sort of reach your vision or reach your career goal. So those are the topics I wanted to go over today. I do hope I see you next time from the Office of the CEO. And until then, cheers.